Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome everyone to the November Ordinary Council meeting. We're starting slightly late tonight at about 6 minutes past 6. Kaya Marman, Kaya Yoga, Kaya Bridie, Yana Nook, Nalak Kadij Winjialak Nini, Nalak Kadij Nija Bujabal, Wajak Nunga Bujalalak Nini, Kora Kora Nijie Burawan. On behalf of the town of Bassendean, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet, the Wajak people of the Noongar Nation. May their campfires burn forever. I'd also like to remind people that our meetings are recorded, live streamed and uploaded to the town's website. I have a few announcements tonight. Council are currently undertaking targeted consultation with occupants and owners of properties potentially impacted by proposed changes to existing parking control measures within the town centre. The town is therefore seeking feedback on the various proposed changes impacting Hamilton Street, Whitfield Street, Allperth Road and Kenny Street. Comments are invited until the 22nd of December 2023, prior to the matter being formally considered by Council in early 2024. Please check the town's website for further details. I'd also like to say that friends and neighbours on Saturday the 2nd of December, come along to our free Music on the Green outdoor concert showcasing the talents of amazing local performers. This will be a fun-filled, alcohol-free event suitable for the whole family. The lineup includes 5-piece group The Community Chess, featuring locals Adam and Dee Kamoski, a captivating performance of Freebird by Cindy Stevens, who is a well-known local solo artist, followed by popular cover band License to Thrill with renditions of disco, rock and pop classics. I would also like to acknowledge and warmly welcome Hilary McWilliam in the gallery, who served on council from 2019 to 2023. Hilary has always quietly dedicated her time and energy to serving her community and this town. Always willing to go the extra mile to help her fellow councillors, a quality that was evident throughout her time serving this council. I would like to offer Hilary a small token of our thanks for her service and wish her well in her travels, because Hilary has already been travelling in the last few weeks, seeing beautiful parts of the country. So Hilary, if you'd like to come up. This is for you, my dear. You can say a few words if you like. Okay, I will. Stand up on the podium. Really? Be pretend there.
I think I'm fine here. I've got these.
Okay.
First of all, thank you very much for your kind words, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow councillors, to wish all of the new councillors the best of luck in your endeavours. It's no small gig. It requires a lot of work and reading, and I'm starting to read novels again, which is kind of fun. But I will keep an eye on council, and if I can help in any way, I intend to do that. So please don't feel as if I've disappeared into the group, but completely I am here to help if I can. Yeah, I think that's probably a few words.
Thank you. Thank you, Hilary.
I can also thank the staff and so the pleasure's been working with all of you.
Thank you, Hilary. Attendance, apologies and applications for leave of absence. Now, Councillor Ames will be joining the meeting online at 6:30. Apologies, we've got Councillor Emily Wilding on leave at the moment, And are there any applications for leave of absence? No? Okay.
Yes, Madam Mayor. That would be leave of absence from the 11th through to the 19th.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Plifka. You don't have to stand when you're talking. So you have a copy of that?
Yep.
Okay. Councillors, we have some declarations of interest. I'll just ask the CEO to read out the declarations of interest.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The first declaration is from Councillor Carter. It's in relation to item 12.3, the Perth History Association Museum of Perth. And the nature of the interest is it's an impartiality interest, because Councillor Carter is a member of the Bassendean Historical Society, and Councillor Carter volunteers to open the Pensioner Guard Cottage. Based on the fact that it's an impartiality interest, Councillor Carter will be staying for that item and debating that item and staying to vote for that item. The other declaration of interest is for Councillor Plifka, the Deputy Mayor. It's on item 12.5 concerning the differential rates policy item. The nature of the interest is financial, and on that basis, Councillor Plifka will be taking no part in the debate or the vote and will be leaving the room for that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now come to presentations or deputations. I understand that we've got one deputation, Mr. Reese Harley. Would someone be able to pull a chair up to the front and the microphone? That would be great.
Sensitive mic.
Thanks, CEO. Hello again. Hi. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak briefly tonight. As some of the councillors
excuse me.
Yes?
Miss. Okay. If we can have quiet while a deputation is taking place, thank you. Okay. Please continue, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted the opportunity to come and present a few issues and to also answer any queries that councillors might have in relation to this item. The history of it, very briefly, is that in 2021, Council resolved to go out to an expression of interest process for this site to be disposed of by the council to a community or not-for-profit organisation so that it could be restored at that organisation's expense and used for community purposes as a museum. Expressions of interest were, the expression of interest process was responded to, and we made a response that was in line with that. Council wanted it to be used as a community facility, wanted it to be open to the public, and based the assessment on that. We then progressed on that understanding with our architects and heritage consultants and have put together the plans that are in front of you this evening, and they've been endorsed by State Heritage Council, and State Heritage Council have noted that that would be a great outcome for the building. Our model of operation is that in order to maintain the property into the future, in order to restore the gardens, and in order to bring activity to that side, and to ensure that the property is restored, is that we would utilise volunteers, staff on site, and also a training program to provide for the ongoing maintenance of the building and the financial maintenance of the upkeep, the insurance and the council rates and all the rest. Whereas before that responsibility sat with council, now that responsibility has shifted to us. Certainly the property was built as a residence, but has not been used as such for about 40 years. It is possibly council's prerogative to determine that you would like it to remain as or revert to being a residence as per the zoning. And That's an option that I think would not be the best community outcome, as there is an expectation that this site would be utilised for community purposes, as it has been for 4 decades now. And certainly to allow the cottage to be opened as a museum, to provide, for example, bathroom to visitors, to provide storage space to the Historical Society, to provide facilities that would support the opening and operation of the museum. It's necessary for there to be more than just that tiny one building. You know how small it is, and in order for that to be open to the public, it's always been the case that we need a kitchen, we need a bathroom, we need storage on site in order for it to actually be used as a museum. Should council wish for it to be used as a residence, the building as a residence, and not support the change of use application, that would pose the major logistical challenges for the cottage to be opened as a museum. There wouldn't be a kitchen, there wouldn't be a toilet, there wouldn't be a bathroom, there wouldn't be storage facilities for volunteers. These hurdles could be overcome. Theoretically, you could build a kitchen, you could build a bathroom, you could do things to support the opening of the cottage. But the residence has an integral connection to the cottage, and the reason why the cottage remains is because of the construction of the residence and the history of that building. And so the State Heritage Council, in its listing of the site, notes the integral connection between the two properties. So what I've put before council is what we promised we would do. It's in line with our proposal and our submission through the expression of interest process. It's in line with the recent history of the site for the last 4 decades. It would provide a meeting facility, storage facilities for the Historical Society. It would provide kitchen and bathroom facilities for the opening of the museum. It's been deemed by State Heritage Council that it would be, a good heritage outcome, and council officers have deemed that the proposal would be a viable option for the property to be restored and maintained. So I really seek council's support to allow us to deliver on that vision. If council determines not to accept the application, that would be an interesting path, because there would be a series of things that we would then need to talk about. The legal deed between our organisation and the council around the restoration of this property and the gifting of it, the good faith in which we entered the agreement and responded to the expression of interest, and all of the other organisations who might have wanted to express an interest in the property if it wasn't for, if the future of it was not to be used for community purposes. It could become a little complicated. I'm sure smart people can work it out, and the building is protected and safe, and we will restore it, and we will do what we've said we're going to do, and we'll keep faith with that. But I do think that the best outcome for the community is for the community to be able to access the building and utilise it for community purposes, and that's the proposal that we've put forward. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm not sure if the standing orders allow it, but I am happy to answer questions if there are any.
So just before we start, I do believe that the agreement for you to do a presentation was because councillors had multiple questions specifically for yourself.
Sure.
So that's just to clarify why Reese is back here again to do a further deputation, because there are questions that councillors have, as we have noted from the emails that have been going backwards and forwards for the last few days. So Councillor Carter, I think you're first.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor, and can I thank you, Mr. Harley, for doing this all over again, considering you did it last week as well, so it's very kind of you. I do have some questions, and I have I'm sure there's absolutely no intention of having the house revert as a residence. I think the main issue was that why are we being asked to do a change of use now, before any structural and restoration works have been done? Perhaps that can come back to us when there is actually work being done, and it's a matter of good faith between the two of us. I think the opening of the cottage is going ahead. I know I was there doing it, and the intention for the residents. I don't think there's a museum component to that one. Am I clear? Am I right on that?
In answer to that question, in the plans, we'd noted spaces within the residence that we'd assigned as gallery spaces. But, you know, in the discussions with council and understanding feedback from the community, there's a desire for it not to be an intensively used site, not for it to be a carnival in essence. And we are very happy to take council's direction and feedback and community feedback on the use of it. But there is sufficient space within the property for there to be a meeting room, for there to be gallery, for there to be office space, for there to be storage space. We're quite open and flexible with how it can be used in the future. We don't have a fixed idea about exactly how every single room should be used.
May I have one more?
Yes, you
question?
certainly may.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So we're both on the same page on this. We want the building restored, and the change of use, which would allow your trainees, office staff, and people to use it rather than as a residence. Is that the reason you're wanting a change of use?
Yes, correct. In essence, to put it really bluntly, the building has been utilised for a non-residential purpose by council for 40 years.
That's right. Yes.
So actually what we are doing is tidying up a issue that council could have and should have resolved probably 4 decades ago when it decided to purchase a residential property and use it for a community purpose. So here we are trying to do the right thing, abide by council and planning policy and formalise what has been an informal use of the building for a long time. Using it for both community and exhibition purpose or use. That's because under your planning scheme, those are the 2 subcategories that best reflect our intention for the site, which is that the cottage itself be used as a museum space and the adjoining space, the residents, be used as offices and storage and support space, and community meeting room space. So we've put a proposal that would make alterations to the property to enable it to be compliant as a community use, for example, the disabled bathroom, widening door frames in the central corridor of the building, and generally making provision for it to be compliant as a community purpose, as that's been the intention and what council had asked us to do.
One last point, and I'll vacate. So therefore, you don't need the change of use now. That can come once a major part of the restoration work, and council will consider that later. That's what I'm hearing from you.
In answer to that, I'm not sure about that, because I'm not sure that I would take advice from your planning department on this, but the building, the alterations that we are making and the agreement that we have between us and council is for the property to be used for community purposes. If the intention was that the property be a residence, then we wouldn't be putting in a universal accessible bathroom or parking. So I'm walking down a path which was laid by the council, and I'm complying with those things that had been expected of us as we entered into this agreement. So I do think that the change of use is necessary, because the change of use formalises and basically puts us in good standing with the way that the property has been utilised for a long time, and that's what we said we would do in our expression of interest. So I'm not a planning expert, but that's my understanding of the situation.
Thank you. I would ask people in the gallery to refrain from making comments whilst we're having questions backwards and forwards. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Plifka.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Might, I guess, just start with a few practical questions and then move on to other types of questions. In terms of the renovations, so you're seeking the change of use now so that the place can be occupied for office space.
No,
So you wouldn't need to use it for office space until the renovations are complete?
that's correct, yes.
And so how would that be inconsistent with what Councillor Carter was suggesting in terms of not having the change in use until you required it?
So, again, I'd have to defer to your planning staff on the technicalities of that, but my understanding was that it was our job to formalise the use of this space as a community purpose facility, and we put plans to council on the basis that it be used for a community purpose facility. If we had put a set of plans to council for it to be used as a residence, then we would have been having a very different discussion with your planning team about what the requirements of our architects be. We would have been looking at it as a house. If it's not for the purpose of being a house, it's for the purpose of being a community facility, then that's the path we're walking down, and that's why we're at this point. The building will be a building site while the renovations happen, but the renovations are to enable the building to be used as a community facility. So you wouldn't, for example, propose to council to open a bar and go to the whole extent of opening a bar that was compliant as a bar and then later change its use to be a residence, because that would be disingenuous and that would be showing bad faith to the community in terms of the process.
But potentially in terms of the
planning.
practicality, one might first seek the change of use to ensure that they could obtain that, and then on the basis of having obtained that change of use, they might then submit plans which were
Councillor
consistent.
Plifka, could you move closer to the microphone?
Sorry, so they might then submit the, I suppose, application for the buildings works, which was consistent with the change of use that had been granted, because as you've identified, at present, there isn't that change of use. Yes, there is, I think everyone accepts there was a historical way in which that facility was used.
And we were gifted the property for the purpose of doing what we're proposing.
Yeah, and I guess that comes to the question of, I mean, is it your position that this council must proceed in that way, or that they have to have regard to, obviously, have regard to yourself, but also to affected neighbours, the greater, wider community, that would all be things which would be weighed into the decision. So there isn't certainty in that regard. And I guess the final question then would be, if it were to remain as a residence, could you make it work?
Okay. Thanks. I'm not sure how to answer the first part of the question, but I think I've kind of made my point on that, and so I don't want to labour the point, but obviously we're just doing really what council asked us to do. In relation to could it work as a residence, it's not a question I considered before this afternoon. The practicalities of that, it is possible. It certainly is possible. It is possible to treat the two buildings on site as having separate functions, the residence to be used as a residence, the cottage to be used as a museum. It must be remembered that the lot is one lot. It's one lot. And so my understanding is one lot can't have split zoning. So it's zoned one way or the other. Although again, I'll defer to the planning experts, but it's one lot. It's never been our intention or desire to subdivide the lot, although that had been proposed or suggested by others, that could potentially be an option for the building. The reason for that is because the State Heritage Council were very clear that the buildings are one unit. It's always been that way. The reason why they both exist in that fashion is because they've always been lived in as one unit. They've always been, and their history is inextricably linked. So it's never been in our consideration to split them and to split their use, because that would be inconsistent with the history of the property, the whole point of which we're trying to celebrate, and not, the whole point of which we're trying to celebrate. So their contiguous use is important for the history of the site. If the cottage was to be utilised as a historical ornament of the garden of the residence, in essence, there would be some operational logistical challenges around that, particularly around bathroom, storage, tea prep, and supporting volunteers on site. It's possible, everything's possible. I don't think it's the best community outcome, because what that would mean is that we would not be able to provide office accommodation for a curator, for a researcher, for a volunteer or for a volunteer program. We wouldn't be able to provide meeting space for the Historical Society or other not-for-profit organisations who wanted to utilise it. And we then wouldn't have the capacity to have probably any more than 2 or so volunteers on site because of how tiny the building is. So it's possible. I don't think it's the best outcome.
In terms of that, obviously you say that this is the first time you've come to consider this, so you possibly don't have to hand an answer, but could you potentially make it work from the rental return? Would that be able to cover the ongoing upkeep, or is that something you would need more time to consider?
You know, off the bat, yes. Financially, it would stack up. If the residence was restored as beautifully as we're proposing and it looked lovely and the gardens were done and the floorboards were polished and the ceiling was fixed and all of the problems were resolved, then yes, of course, this would be, in a rental crisis, an extremely, you know, desirable property so close to the river, a wonderful part of town. Yes, there would be a rental return. The rental return would cover the costs of council fees, rates, charges, maintenance. Yes, that's a model that could work. I don't think it's the best community outcome. It would provide a house. It would provide a small museum. It wouldn't provide the community facility that has been desired and has been talked about for decades now.
So, Councillor Plifka, I would...
I didn't have any more questions, just allowing the opponent to say his piece.
Okay. So I would like to ask a question following on from that. Would a building that's proposed to have a community use potentially attract a greater level of sponsorship and funding? I'm interested in understanding. I understand recently you got a $50,000 sponsorship for materials. I understand that you've had some gifting in the past of office equipment that you've been able to sell to raise money. So my question is, these entities that are providing such sponsorship, are they attracted to the fact that it's a historical building that's going to be used for community use? And would they likewise provide such sponsorship if it was for a residential purpose? And I think that might be speculation, but I'm interested in your opinion.
Perspective, yeah. The answer is yes and no. So the answer, honestly, is that yes, entities like the State Heritage Council, for example, do provide grants for private residences. So yes, it would be eligible. Bunnings, who've offered materials and labour as part of this project once we get development approval. I'm not sure. In relation to them, I'm not sure. The pitch to them was about the community project, the community outcome, the community involvement, obviously the local residents being their customers. That was the pitch. We would need to have another discussion. You could still potentially attract funding. It may lead to there being fewer donors interested, potentially. I'm not saying it would be impossible,
That's if it was
but
just a
might be.
residence, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that it would be more difficult. There would be some donors or granting organisations for whom it wouldn't be a problem, State Heritage Council being one, but there are others who would only want to donate goods, time, cash, because they saw the local community benefit that will come from the broader vision that we've pitched, which is for it to be used as a community facility and provide volunteer and training opportunities.
Okay. Now, it's been some time since I heard the discussion about the gallery space, but my recollection was when you originally provided deputations and information to the previous council that the gallery space was going to be open not only for historical displays but also potentially for art displays and things of that like. Could you refresh our memory, because I think you also indicated that you were liaising with some of the art groups in the town to actually have free display space, is that right?
That's right, and that certainly was our intention. What I've seen, and no bad reflection on the planning team, have been very good, but this development application comes with a very long list of conditions, and quite specific conditions around exact timing of when the building should and shouldn't be used. And my assessment, having been an elected member myself in the past, is that it's burdensome. It's probably too burdensome. To specify exact times on exact days when a building might be open to the public as a gallery space, or the exact, I think it's overkill. But I do think that the planning team are obviously trying to do their best to satisfy local residents and to ensure that there's not a negative impact on the local community. In terms of the residents, yes, we had met with the Bassendean arts community, and their committee's recently been refreshed, and they've recently reached out to us wanting to utilise the building in the future once it's restored. We would like to be able to support the Bassendean arts community and other not-for-profit local groups to utilise that building as we promised. That was our commitment. We're going to have, if approved, meeting space in the building, storage space, kitchen, bathroom space, flexible space as well as office space, so it could be utilised by the Bassendean arts community. However, the planning conditions which have been recommended on this would make that difficult.
Okay. Councillors, further questions? Okay, I do have a couple more, if you don't mind. Just before we leave that last item, I would assume, like many other entities in the town, that there can be applications made to the town for events, special events and things like that. So if you had things like you could possibly trial the hours that have been provided by the town, but I'm assuming that if there's special events, that you could probably apply to the town for exemptions on certain occasions. Is that right?
Yes, one of the planning conditions in the report is that we could run events that would put us over the cap of 20 people on site at any one time with the written permission of the town prior. This is one of the examples where I think it's probably overkill, in that it creates a burden for the town in perpetuity to assess, respond to in writing requests from us to utilise the building. Let's say, for example, we have a local school group who wants to come, and they might want to come a couple of times a year, and then we might have a family reunion once or twice, and we might have an exhibition launch in the gallery or something. We're talking about 6 or 7 times a year, when there might have to be a formal approval process through the town. I might be cheeky in saying that I'm advised that a local resident who lives very nearby has had a fundraiser or a party at their own house and had more than 20 people turn up to that. Yet they did not need to go to council and apply for written permission, because there's not a restriction on the number of guests you can invite to a dinner party. So it seems burdensome and overkill, in my view, having had experience as an elected member before. But I can understand that the town is trying to protect local residents from impacts.
Okay, but you're willing to actually comply with those conditions to trial this, are you not?
We've been very willing. I would be interested to know if, for example, a planning condition could be by delegated authority somehow overlooked. So I'm not sure about the technicalities of that. But yes, I expect the planning director's not going to turn up with his clock at 3 and boot us off the property if the gate, if Jenny leaves the cottage open until 3:15. But that currently is the kind of the arrangement that's set in the planning conditions, which, as I said, I think is.
Okay, I have one last question. Not-for-profits. Your entity is a not-for-profit, correct?
Yes.
Specialising in historical and museum research and the like. So my understanding, having read through the charter, which I'm sorry, I was many years ago that I read that, can you tell me at the end of your charter, is there a requirement for disposal of such a property and how it would be disposed? I'd be
Yep.
interested in hearing that again.
Yes, so there's an obligation set by state government for all incorporated associations in Western Australia. There was recently a requirement that all incorporated associations update it, but in essence, if an incorporated association should cease operating, they're required, the members of the organisation are required to convene and dispose of the assets of the organisation in entirety to like organisations.
Councillor Carter, could you let him finish the question?
So,
Yes.
and so in this regard, our organisation would be closely aligned with or associated with other organisations like the National Trust, the Royal WA Historical Society, Family History, Western Australia, perhaps a little bit tangentially, the West Australian Museum, or the Bassendean Historical Society, or the Council. They would be the only kind of logical, sensible organisations to which this property could be disposed of in the form of a gift if the organisation was to cease operating. So yes, that's the requirement. That's the legal requirement for all incorporated associations. A cricket club closes, does give its cricket bats to a local cricket club or dispose of them in accordance with the objects of the association.
Okay. Just before we proceed, can I just check, Councillor Ames has joined the meeting yet? Okay. Okay, Councillor Carter?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My understanding, that's only if the organisation ceases to operate.
Correct.
Given that you're a not-for-profit organisation, your charter, your model rules allow the purchase and disposal of property while you are operating. So theoretically, and I'm sure this is very theoretical, you could sell on One Surrey Street while you're still operating. So let's make that quite clear. Let's be also crystal clear that
Yes.
I really want this work to go ahead. So,
So just to fully respond to that, that is true to the extent that the council has a caveat over the property. So the council has a caveat over the property which would prevent any sale or disposal to ensure that a few things happen. One, that all of the renovations that we promised would occur will occur. And two, that the Bassendean Pensioner Guard Cottage remain open to the public on a monthly basis. That's a caveat that will stand and remain as a legal security for the council over our organisation and over the property.
Thank you. Councillor Plifka?
Yeah, look, I think we all accept that once you satisfy those conditions, but you would still then be able to dispose of the property subject to that requirement. I mean, the caveat would simply be lifted and put back on for the person to whom you transfer the property. So it wouldn't be an impediment to sale.
I think that actually that there will be an abiding requirement on our organisation or any future owner to continue to ensure that the cottage remains open to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. So that would run with the property, but it wouldn't be an impediment to you transferring that property to somebody else.
Yes, so if for example we gifted or sold the property to the National Trust, which happened with Bob Hawke's childhood home recently, the National Trust would then have to take on the obligation of continuing to open the cottage as a museum. Opening the cottage as a building to the public in perpetuity, yes, that would be a requirement.
Councillor Carter's point, so that it would be possible for you to dispose of that asset during your tenure there, so before your organisation is wound up. So during its operation, you could transfer it to a different entity, and that could be for an amount of money.
Theoretically, yes, we could, and just to restate that, yes, we could, but the cottage would need to remain open to the public.
Yeah, so provided somebody was willing to accept those conditions, that transfer could occur.
I think that's not provided someone's willing to accept those conditions. They are, correct me if I'm wrong, they're an in perpetuity condition that's required to be fulfilled
by.
irrespective of who owns the property.
Yes, so I mean in the context of somebody deciding to take on that property, they would need to be satisfied that they had the ability to do that, because that's what would be required of them.
Yep. Okay. So, councillors, unless there's further questions, I'm going to draw a line under this. Thank you for your presentation,
No worries.
and thank you for answering the questions. You've been very patient. Thank you, councillors. I will again ask, have we got Councillor Ames on board yet?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm loud and clear. You can hear me, maybe give a thumbs up, but I can see everyone and hear everything loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Councillor Ames, to the meeting. By the way, former Councillor Hilary McWilliam is in the room and has received a gift from Council for her services. So it's a pity you're not here. So, okay, councillors. We'll now move on to item 6, which is statements by members of the public. If you have a statement, I'd ask you to raise your hand, come to the microphone. So, just hang on till we turn the microphone on, sorry.
Clive Brown, 2 Surrey Street in Bassendean. Just a couple of things I wish to praise the council with. Firstly, I did apply for make a deputation tonight, which was rejected. Secondly, if you care to have a look at the 2021 minutes, you will see the issue of the future use was not decided by the council in 2021. It was said very clearly at the time that if there is to be a change of use, that would need to come before the council at the time. So there is no obligation on the council, as it is currently constituted, to adhere to anything that was allegedly said or done in 2001, because it wasn't said or done in 2001. It was always deferred. And the agreement between the council and the association was one that never envisaged by agreement that there would be a community use, because it was not within the power of the officers to agree to such agreement, because the council had not endorsed it, and the council cannot, the officers cannot enter into an agreement unless it has been approved by council, and such an agreement had not been approved by council and is not included in the agreement that was entered into between the council and the association. So there is no obligation on the council as it is currently constituted to agree. The second thing is that I wish to point out, just very briefly, is that the main conditions and the object, the concern here is about the use of the residence as an office. Every day, each day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 230 to 240 days a year. The issue with the cottage is the application that's been made by the association relates to the residence. Doesn't relate to the cottage. It's made clear in the application that is made by the association. Our application is based on an application for the use of the residence, not the cottage. So anything that relates to the cottage, whether school groups are going to meet, happy birthday parties are going to meet, whoever's going to meet in relation to that is entirely another matter. The cottage has been used for that ad infinitum, and it doesn't make any difference at all in relation to the planning. The third point I'd make is just about the building itself. If you look at the building itself and what is proposed, it's an office. It is an office.
So,
And I just finished there, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity. But I just wish to make those few points, as I didn't have the opportunity to make a delegation.
thank you. Ms. McWilliam, if you'd like to come to the microphone.
Hilary McWilliam, 20 Elder Parade, Bassendean. Back in 2021, when this was before the council, I was a member of the council, and I recall at the time that we were confronted by a history of expenditure on the residents, which was at that state had become in quite a parlous state and was actually locked up so no one could use it. We were looking for opportunities that would not create a burden on the community. We were looking for an opportunity that would provide community facility, that would support the Guards Cottage as a museum, and duly from that there was a decision made to go to expressions of interest and the Museum of Perth, and Mr. Harley put in the winning application. There was an enormous amount of unrest and disagreement at the time. People from the Historical Society were very concerned, but unfortunately hadn't been able to find a way forward that didn't end up costing the town and ratepayers excessive amounts of money. We were involved in a heritage architect, and that was a very expensive exercise in and of itself. And there was some interference from that particular person who was involved, and that was, my consideration was completely out of order. And certainly the town managed to move on from that interference.
So, Councillor...
The statement I want to make is, you know, you always ask me to ask questions.
I'm winding you up again, yes. So, apologies.
The statement I want to make is that in recent times, in the last 12 months or 18 months, Council has discussed and agreed to try to operate in making decisions that are financially sustainable.
So thank you very much, Mr. McWilliam. Okay, do we have any other people wishing to make statements? Okay. So we'll move on to item 7, which is questions from members of the public. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, raise your hand, come to the microphone, state your name and address. No? Okay, so we'll move on to...
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, there's 2 on...
sorry.
We can take those on notice.
Yep. So I have 2 questions that have been sent in by email by Mr. Yates. The staff will provide a written response, and those responses will appear in the minutes of the meeting. Okay, and I think that's it. Thank you very much. Okay, so councillors, just give me a minute. So councillors, we'll move on to confirmation. There's no petitions that I know of. So we'll move on to, and I'll just, again, sorry. Are we right? Okay, so we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. 9.1, that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 17th of October 2023 be received and confirmed as a true and correct record. And part B is that the minutes of the special... Well, we'll do 9.1A first. Do I have a mover? Councillor Carter, seconded Councillor Plifka. Anyone against? I declare that carried. I'm sure that Councillor Ames is in agreement there, unless he pipes up.
If I have any questions, I'll show up.
Okay, thank you. Then we've got 9.1B, that the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 24th of October 2023 be received and confirmed as a true and correct record. Do I have a mover? Councillor John, seconder, Councillor Burke, and do I have anyone against?
I don't seem to have 9.1B on my agenda. Was it one that did a corrected agenda sent out? Sorry, I should have had this on. Yeah, I don't have 9.1B on my agenda.
It's an omission, but it has been. It was updated in Docs on Tap or the online one. Online.
Thank you. I have no objection. I just don't have it on my...
Yeah. There's a few anomalies with some of the numbering, so they have been brought to the attention of the staff, and I do believe they've been updated on the website. But some of us, for instance, I'm actually working off a document that was printed off before the update, so yeah, sorry about that. Item 10, business deferred from a previous meeting, there is nil. Item 11 is the external committee reports and updates. So 11.1 is that council notes the attached documents from external committee meetings held within the reporting period. Can I have a mover for Councillor Carter, seconder? Councillor John. Anyone against? I'll declare that carried. Okay, so councillors, we'll move on to item 12, which is en bloc. Now, you would have received a separate sheet for en bloc in front of you, and Councillor Ames, I believe it was emailed out to you.
Yes.
Okay, so councillors, coming out of en bloc thus far, I have item 12.2, which is the incentives for trees of significance. Item 12.6, use of town facilities on BIC reserve. And then the other items remain en bloc, which is 12.7, 12.8, 12.9, 12.12. Can I ask councillors, are there any of those items that you wish to pull out of en bloc? Okay, so councillors, can I have a mover for items 12.7, 12.8, 12.9, 12.12 be moved en bloc? Councillor Polifka, do I have a seconder? Councillor Burke, is there anyone against? I'll declare that carried. So councillors, we will move to the first item, which is 12.1, the management arrangements for Hyde Retirement Village. And I would ask, I think it's a joint presentation between Mr Gibson and Mr White, although you did cover it last week, so would you like to provide any further commentary?
Through you, Madam Mayor, nothing from me, and I presume nothing from the Director of Corporate Services there.
Okay. So, councillors, do you have any further questions on this item? Okay, so, councillor, there was an officer recommendation, but also you will note that I circulated a proposed amendment. I just ask CEO if there's any objection to the amendment that I sent through, which was to shorten the timeline from a 5+5, a 5-year plus a 5-year option, to a 5-year plus a 3-year option.
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, there's no concerns with that at all.
Okay, so councillors, I'd like to move my amendment, which you've got in front of you. Do I have a seconder for that? I'm Councillor Carter. Do I have anyone against? I'll declare that carried. So the next item is item 12.2, incentives for trees of significance. Again, I'll ask the officers if there's any commentary on this. Okay, so again, councillors, you will note that I sent through an amendment on this item. I'll read out the amendment for the audience. That council requests inclusion of possible incentives as attached for consideration of council during the 2024-25 budget process, trees maintenance grants, potential reduction in fees associated with applications retaining mature or significant trees, where such incentives only apply to trees that are listed on the town's significant tree register under LPS 11. So this is merely bringing this to the budget process for us to consider. So councillors, do you have any questions, or I'm happy to move this item? Councillor Polifka?
Yes, thank you. Not sure if it's through you to Mr Adams or Ms Davey. These measures, how much time would that take for you to, I suppose, review and provide some options for council through the budget process? Is it something which is eminently doable, or is it going to be quite a task?
Can I just say, Councillor Plifka, that the officer who created this report is Community Planning, Mr Gibson.
We'll direct that to Mr Gibson then. I had not pegged him as the tree guy, but Mr Gibson.
Through you, Madam Mayor. There's probably not much more to add to the discussion apart from the information contained on page 15. It wouldn't be overly difficult to actually put this into place. It would be not a direct cost, it would be an opportunity cost of staff time. Obviously, if the grants were taken up, there would be a direct financial cost to council. But in terms of offering reduced application fees, that would be simply a couple of lines, I'd suggest, in the schedule of fees and charges as part of the annual budget, so not too taxing. And in terms of tree maintenance grants, they could be done as an amendment to council's adopted community funding policy, in which case we'd be setting some parameters as to when landowners would be eligible for a grant and to what extent that grant would be provided.
In terms of the, I think it's the second point which you mentioned in relation to applications, would that be just development applications, or are there any other sorts of applications that could be captured by the word applications, or do we need to explicitly say development applications?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in the second column under comment, it refers to applications for development approval, so that probably covers it satisfactorily. It could apply to any application though that council saw fit. I suppose the comment provided here was in the context of applications for development approval, but equally if council wanted to broaden the scope of the incentive, it could broaden it out to other applications.
Well, on that point, I'll defer to the Mayor in terms of what her intention was, but perhaps it was development applications.
The intent was to follow the commentary that was in the report relating to development applications rather than, so I can actually add development in front of that word.
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
Okay, councillors, any further questions? I'd like to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Plifka. Do I have anyone against? I'll declare that carried. So, councillors, we have 12.3, which is the application for development approval, proposed works and change of use for number 1, lot 50, Surrey Street. Clearly this is the item that has attracted the most commentary, the most emails, and taken up a considerable amount of discussion time. So I will ask Mr Gibson if he would like to provide any additional points, particularly given the number of emails that have circulated regarding this item.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yeah, I probably wouldn't normally, but given that there's been a lot of email traffic and we've had a deputation this evening, I'll probably just clarify a couple of points. In terms of the comment from Mr Harley, certainly respect his opinion and his view that the conditions, in his eyes at least, appear burdensome, and that's a matter for council to consider this evening. As alluded to though by Mr Harley, that those conditions were assembled in an effort to balance the competing objectives, whilst considering the application positively based on the planning assessment, but also wanting to obviously preserve the amenity of the local area as appropriate. Staff come up with that suite of conditions. It's open to council to make them more burdensome if it so chose. It's also open to council to make them less burdensome. Obviously what we have put in place, or what we've recommended council put in place, we think strikes the right balance, but obviously that is a matter for council to determine this evening. Further, there is also the opportunity for council to impose the conditions as recommended, and there is always the ability for the applicant in the near, medium or long term to lodge a subsequent application seeking to vary those conditions. Obviously, at that stage, there might be more information that's available to council, the performance of the applicant up until that point. But certainly at this point in time, the staff recommendation is for those conditions. If there was going to be a one-off situation at the residence or the cottage, the regulations allow the temporary use of a facility without requiring further approval. So that is something that could be actioned by the applicant, but in terms of the day-to-day, year-to-year operation of the site, staff think these 13 conditions probably strike the right balance between facilitating the development whilst also preserving the local amenity of the area.
Thank you, Councillor Carter.
May I ask a question of Mr Gibson, Madam Mayor? Thank you. Mr Gibson, I really want these renovations and restoration to go ahead. My issue is the change of use request happening up front. I would prefer to see some work being done, as it has been 2 years down the track and we haven't seen any structural work done yet, to have that the change of use come back to council when some work has been done. Is that possible to do that tonight?
Through Madam Mayor, strictly speaking, it is. That would involve the imposition of a condition to the effect that excludes the use of the building. That would give rise to a right of review to the applicant. It would also give, I imagine, the applicant something to consider about the subsequent investment in the site. Going on part of the discussion before about separating works and use, I'd suggest that's quite uncommon. If one was to look at the Bassendean Hotel proposal, amongst many more, the works and the use were bundled into the same application. If the Bassendean Hotel, for example, had been given approval to do all the restoration works without the approval to run the tavern, I doubt very much the works would have been completed. It's not at all uncommon for the application to be lodged in its totality, which is what we have before us tonight. It is open to council to seek to separate them, but that would not be without risk of challenge. And if it was challenged, we would need to know, from council's point of view, why council sought to separate the two.
Councillor Plivka.
Yeah, just following on from that. So if council were minded to seek to separate the two, and it might not necessarily be for Director Gibson, it might be a governance question, would council vote in favour of granting the application but amend that to impose a condition, or would council refuse, foreshadowing that they would grant the application with that condition imposed?
Through Madam Mayor, I'd suggest the most appropriate way, if council is minded, and it is not recommended that council pursue such approach, but if council was minded to do that, I think it would be most appropriate to approve the application but impose a condition of sorts that effectively excludes the elements that council wants to exclude. Council needs to remember that it has one application for development approval in front of it, so it needs to make one decision. If council refuses the application, it refuses the whole application. It's open to council to do that, but based on the discussion I've been privy to, that's not the desire of council laws. If council wants to separate the two and deal with them discreetly, it's most appropriately done as an approval of the components it considers acceptable, with a condition of sorts that excludes those components that it considers unacceptable.
So just in terms of that, somebody would move for approval, and then it would be open for somebody to seek to amend. Is that how the process would unfold?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think the advice from WAUGA is best practice is that the officer's recommendation is moved in the first instance, moved and seconded, and if there was a councillor that wanted to move an amendment, that would be a subsequent action.
So councillors, sorry. So,
Thanking the director.
can I just ask a quick question there? Mr Gibson, with the community use of the facility, it's had a wide and varied history, is that correct? For many decades, that building, despite its category as a residential property?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I understand, sir.
Yep, okay. So, may I also ask, given the 2019, I think it was 2019, timeline when we were going to turn it into an infant health clinic with exhibition space at the front, I understand that there was approval for it to be a community use back then, but that lapsed because the tender documents, it lapsed because the project never progressed. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it lapsed because it wasn't enacted. It wasn't enacted because of the council's decision of the day to discontinue the project as it were at the time, principally on the basis of the financial cost of the town. That's a matter of public record from the time, I think in 2021, but certainly there was an approval granted in September 2019. Between the briefing session and tonight's agenda, staff have attached an extract from that 2019 development approval, which illustrates what council at the time considered an appropriate use of the site.
Okay. Councillor Burke?
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor, Mr Gibson, are there any conditions if the operator wishes to sell the premises during operation? Is there any conditions regarding the sale of that?
Through Madam Mayor, as sort of alluded to by the current owner, there is a charge over the land in the form of a caveat, which obviously is an impediment to selling. It would be that if the property was sold, whoever the purchaser was would need to enter the same deed and be subject to the same caveat, and therefore the obligation to do certain things would carry on to a subsequent owner.
Okay, sorry, can I ask another question through Madam Mayor?
Councillor Burke, could you speak closer to
Sorry.
the microphone?
Yeah, sure, sorry. So there's no opportunity then to come back to the town of Bassendean before it then was, obviously that my reference is into revenue basically. Would there be, does the town of Bassendean forgo, if there was a sale, any revenue on that property or any capital on that property at all?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the town doesn't own the site, so if it was on-sold, any revenue would naturally go to the current owner. The town effectively took its capital sum via the sale in 2021, which was the notional dollar.
Yeah, that's right.
So, can I just follow up there? Is it correct, in your opinion, Mr Gibson, that the council decided to forego a significant financial benefit from the property in an aspiration to have the property completely renovated and restored and to become a community facility? Would you provide your opinion on that decision of the previous council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd say it's broadly correct, and it's a matter of public record, and it was all recorded at the time for those that want to go and revisit it. But council at the time was presented with a number of options for the site once it had made the decision to discontinue the previous project, and they were pretty broad and pretty varied. It involved potential subdivision, potential sale, potential gifting to the National Trust if it was going to take it off our hands. they were extensively workshopped with the then council and found its way to various briefing sessions and council meetings. It was clear from the discussion and the decision making, which again is on public record, that council sought to focus more on the community access to the site and to the restoration of the building, and in that context was prepared to forego any financial windfall from a more commercially driven transaction. Going to a point that was raised, I think, by Mr. Brown, the deed as a consequence requires the restoration. The deed does not require the residence to be used as a community purpose. So it requires certain things. The restoration is one of them. It does not require the residence to be used as a community purpose. However, when the Museum of Perth, who is the now owner of the site, lodged their EOI or their submission in response to the EOI process, it was made clear to council at that time that that was broadly their proposal. So whilst it's not a requirement of the deed, it was certainly contemplated at the time.
Mr. Brown, if you continue, I will ask you to leave the room. Now, this is your final warning. Thank you, and yours as well, because I'm saying to you, please stop making comments in the background there while we're trying to hear the officers. Sorry about that. All right.
Sorry, that was all I had to say.
Yep.
Just reiterating that the deed does not require the use of the residence as a community purpose, but as part of the then applicant and now owner's submission to council, it was explicitly contemplated.
Okay. Councillors, if you've got further questions, I'll wait for your questions first before I ask a few of mine. Okay. So, Mr. Gibson, could you envisage if the property had no community use and remained residential, could you envisage how we can fulfil the aspirations of that previous council decision to have that facility used principally for community use? I can't actually understand how the two can match.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll probably respond simply by saying this. The report before council tonight is an application for development approval under local planning scheme number 10. I appreciate there is considerable history to this site, going back to 18-something. However, the job for council tonight is to make a decision based on the planning merits of the proposal it has in front of it. The issues raised by the local residents are understood, they're acknowledged, they're addressed in the officer report. If council wishes to make an adverse decision, it is open to it, but that is to be based on genuine planning considerations.
So, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation which I'm happy to move if we're finished with questions. So, are we finished with questions, councillors? Councillor Ames, are you fine? Yes, okay.
Just got a question to you, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
For the last 7 days, and thanks very much, Mr. Gibson, for your clarification this afternoon as well.
Okay, so councillors, I would like to move the officer's recommendation. I'd like to know if I've got a seconder.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillor Ames. Do I have anyone against?
I'd like to move an amendment.
And what would your amendment be, sir?
That would be to approve the development application, but as Director Gibson had mentioned, with the condition of not granting the change of use.
I won't accept that amendment. Thank you. It's up to the mover to accept an amendment. Is that not
then we
correct?
enter into debate.
Sorry,
Then we enter into debate.
yes. But that's correct, is it not?
Wouldn't we need
A
We've
seconder,
got a
yes.
seconder. Councillor Ames has seconded mine.
He seconded the officer's recommendation.
Yes.
Not the amendment recommendation.
No, but the Councillor Polifka has asked me, as the mover of the officer recommendation, to put an amendment, and I've refused it. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Okay. So we'll move into debate.
I think I need a seconder first.
With Councillor Ames
I was
seconded.
seconding my amendment.
No, Councillor Ames seconded the officer recommendation that I've moved.
Yes.
Now, as mover of the officer recommendation, you're asking for an amendment. The amendment comes to the mover, and the mover has the right to refuse or accept.
And if that occurs, then council is given the opportunity to debate whether or not the amendment is imposed on the officer's recommendation.
My advice is, it's my understanding that Councillor Polifka is asking to move an amendment, not a change to your original motion. If Councillor Polifka can achieve a seconder to his amendment, he can then, that is then debated.
Okay.
And then if it is achieved, it becomes the substantive motion.
Okay. So we have Councillor Polifka. Can you read out your amendment?
Yes, so it is the approval be granted, but it be conditioned to refuse the change of use, and if that's successful, I can then provide some reasons, unless I need to provide those at this stage, which I can do.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Okay. So, Councillor Polifka, I obviously will oppose that. So would you like to open?
Yeah, certainly. I suppose in terms of making this decision, certainly was informed by the deputations and statements tonight, so I thank both parties for attending and providing us with that additional information. In terms of the use to which this can be put, and drawing upon the advice of Director Gibson, what's before us is a planning application. So there's a lot of history for this site. Yes, there was an agreement to transfer the site to the Museum of Perth. I mean, that's all history, that's occurred. In terms of what we're being asked to do is to determine whether a change of use from residential to office space is appropriate for this location. Now, in terms of that, I have reservations based on the parking capacity and also in terms of the use that we want to see in that area. Look, yes, historically it might have been used in a particular way, but we have recently gone through an overhaul of all of our planning instruments. We've had a town centre master plan, we've got LPS 11, and through that process it's become quite clear as to where we see the centres of density and where we would see lower, less intense uses. And look, obviously trying to balance the interests of the community. We've got the immediate residents that have a particular view. We've got the broader Bassendean community. And this is why, look, in terms of approving the renovation, I think that'd be great for the community. I mean, the community is going to see the renovations. They're going to see this historical place restored to the way it ought to be. Local government couldn't do that, so we have sought to outsource that to the private sector, and having heard from Mr. Harley of the Museum of Perth, it would appear that he is capable of making that work either way, whether it's as office space and using it to derive an income from the endeavours that would occur there, or alternatively to use the residence as just as that, as a residence, and to derive a rental income from that, which would be, I think, whilst I wouldn't want to put him on the spot, and he might want to confirm that, I think he was off-the-cuff response was that the revenue from that could essentially ensure the upkeep of that property going forward. I think he might have referred to the pensioner guard cottage as ornate lawn ornaments, and that may well serve in of itself a community purpose. I think in the debate, as I recall it, when the Pensioner Guard Cottage was going to be, its fate was decided, I think there were comments that, look, a lot of people, they don't know about the Pensioner Guard Cottage, they don't use the Pensioner Guard Cottage, but the amenity that can be gained by having that restored, as opposed to people having to go inside, use it in that way, is still of value. We have a community which people can walk past, they can jog past, drive past. They'll see this nice old building which is being restored, and it's not restored at the expense of the community. It will have been restored through the abilities of Mr. Harley and the Museum of Perth. So we certainly thank them for doing that and providing and restoring such a facility. But if they can do that in a way which causes minimal, the smallest footprint possible in terms of the impact on the community, and if that's achieved through a usage which is residential, which Mr. Harley's indicated he thinks, whilst it's a more difficult route, is one which he can achieve, then I think that that's a win for everyone and balances, I suppose, all the competing interests.
Thank you. Councillor John, seconder, your right to speak.
Am I obliged?
No, you're not obliged.
Paul ticked off the points that I made.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I will speak. Do you want to speak against or for?
I would like to speak against.
Okay, I'll let you go first.
Having said that, I'd like to speak against. I do think that this should be a community space. It has been so for the past 40 years. It has been something that has been used, and let's face it, when it was originally purchased, the house was in a very good condition, and it was just that it was decided to be renovated back to its original state is what caused a delay. It's been waiting a long time for that. Now, I understand all of the arguments. My goodness, I was involved in so many of them. But the issue being is that the council does provide these things for our if you're talking about revenue and getting back a return on investment, you know, you've got playing fields, you've got playgrounds, you've got libraries, you've got all the things we provide for our residents. Our history and heritage is a very integral part. We are one of the oldest suburbs in Bassendean. We have a rich Indigenous history. None of this now, particularly now we have lost our local studies librarian, is really very accessible to the people. Okay, having said that, I have no objection to it really being used as a community space with all the conditions put around it. I would like to see some work being done on the house. No structural work has been done for the past 2 years. I would like to see that started. I would hate to see a situation, and I'm sure it won't be so, of when a minimum can be done and then office workers can be put in the place. I'm sure that is not going to happen, but there is still that option. So if it came back after substantial work has been done, it comes back to council, I think we can make a much clearer view of it being an important community amenity, fully supported. At the moment, we're being asked to make these changes which would allow office staff to be there and trainees and so on without seeing, you know, what it could be. So I'm not saying that would always be a residence. Sorry, Councillor Plivka, that's not my statement. I would like to see some work being done before we committed tonight to allowing that to happen. And it's certainly not closing the door on anything. Thank you. So I'd like to see the two separated, the development application and then the change of use request coming back to us at a later time.
Okay, Councillor Carter, thank you. Any councillors for Councillor Plivka's amendment? Any councillors against? Did you want to? Okay, okay. You want to talk about it? Talk to it? Okay.
Do I sum up?
No, because I want to talk against it. Thank you very much. So, councillors, in all the development applications that have come before this council whilst I've been on council, almost all of them have had a use coupled in with the DA. That has been standard because no one wishes to invest their money in anything without having surety about how they're going to use that facility. This has been standard practice for all sorts of DAs that have come before this council. It is normal. The other thing I would ask as well is the council always envisaged this space being used for community facilities. We've heard the list, it's in the agenda, the different types of community spaces that will be created by the redevelopment of this building, by the restoration of this building. It includes display space, it includes gallery space. Yes, there is some office space, but it is not a change of use exclusively to office space. It is a change of use to community use. Now, that's clear in the officer's report. The attachments to the report, some of them are confidential, some are not. The attachments are very clear in the contractual arrangements. Councillors are privy to that contract. The public are not. We know that there are caveats on the property in respect to what has to be done and when. The proponent has 2 years and 1 month left to achieve all that's required in that contract. So at that point in time, the council of the future will have a choice. Yes, the council of the future will have a choice about how they're going to proceed if the contract conditions are not met. We're not at that point now. We're at a point where the proponent, following the MOU that he provided to this council that was accepted by council, he is following the process of putting in a DA after consulting with Heritage Architects. Fine, that took a while. He is asking for a change of use, which was always on the MOU about what the building was going to be for. It's not changed in the interim years. Nothing has changed in the proposal to what I see in this report. This is not the timeline to be debating about whether we should give a community use. If this building was owned now by the council, it would be a community use. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. So we have a proponent who is committed contractually to do a certain amount of work. We have a proponent who put in an MOU that was accepted by council, and that use was community use, including museum space, display space, office space, not varied 1 ounce from what was provided originally. So the other issue that I can't quite comprehend is if the property was returned to residential use, we have a pensioner guard cottage that is on the same title, closely attached to the building, with no toilets, no kitchen of its own, no way of independently operating without use of other facilities on the lot that belong to the residents. So how do you operate this? I reckon it would be very challenging. And I suspect that even though anything is possible, there are times in life where maybe it's just too difficult. And to me, it sounds like we're making things difficult, and I don't understand why. I can understand that we might like to see work done faster and quicker. That's great. But there's no way it's going to be used as an office whilst there's demolition going on. I'm sorry, you can't take off the back of the building and use that as an office space at the same time. You can't take out a concrete ceiling and use it as an office at the same time. It's just not possible. So I would encourage councillors to support the officer's recommendation. I would ask you not to support Councillor Polifka's amendment because I feel that this takes us down a path that may well be very problematic in various ways. So thank you, councillors. Are there any other councillors who'd like to enter the debate before I actually ask Councillor Polifka to close? Okay, Councillor Polifka.
Yes, thank you. Look, the use of the premises for community purposes, it's interesting at a stage when we're looking to possibly have new civic facilities. We talk about co-location. If we would have a new facility, all of these functions would be out of that particular civic facility. So in terms of what is the appropriate use, at a point in time when the work has been done, maybe this comes back before this council or another council, and at that point in time, that council, unfettered by what this council has decided, will form a view that that's the appropriate use. In terms of this council being asked to defer to what was assumed to be the view of a previous council without a resolution of that council, and even if there was a resolution of a former council in that way couldn't bind the quasi-judicial function that we're being asked to discharge here, which was identified by Mr Gibson and I think to a lesser extent by Mr Brown. So in terms of the application which is currently before us, we need to consider that on the current state of play, not what could potentially happen, what the building could become, what it currently is. So currently, do we say that this is a building which should be used for office space? And I would say that currently that is not something which we could permit through balancing all the competing interests. Yes, through that balance, that might make things more difficult, or I think to adopt Mr Harley's word, I think burdensome in relation to the conditions that I would say were reasonably imposed by the administration. So yes, there will be difficulties that people have to overcome in order to lessen the burden on other members of the community. That's just part of living in a community. So I would say that at this point in time, whilst very supportive of the work that's proposed to be done, the renovation of the cottage, in terms of a change of use, and having regard to what Mr Harley had said himself, that the renovation could still occur even without that change of use, I'm not convinced that this is going to be detrimental to the renovations, and I suppose any speculation as to what potential consequences could be is really council looking over its shoulder rather than looking towards its role in deciding what is best for the community as a whole.
So thank you, Councillor Polifka. Now, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, Councillor Burke will be voting but not in her seat, so that's fine. We are voting on the amendment that Councillor Polifka has put forward to reject the change of use, to remove the change of use from the officer's recommendation. That's what we're voting on. So I'd ask all those councillors who are for Councillor Polifka's amendment to raise their hands. So I have Councillor Polifka, Councillor John, Councillor Carter. I'd ask Councillor Ames, are you for or against Councillor Polifka's amendment?
I'm against that amendment.
Okay, Councillor Jermaine Burke, are you for or against Councillor Polifka's amendment? Against. So that's 3-3. I have the casting vote. Okay, so I use my casting vote to reject that amendment. Thank you, Councillor Polifka. I appreciate the sentiment and the enthusiasm that councillors have for this item. So, councillors, we will move back to the officer's recommendation, which was moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ames. We now have the officer's recommendation as is without the amendment as proposed by Councillor Polifka. I'll ask for the vote. We will enter into debate again if you like, Councillor Polifka, because I have a mover myself, seconder Councillor Ames. Are you against?
I suppose council has made its position known, certainly not wanting to forego the opportunity for that building to be restored. So no, I won't be opposing that.
Okay. So, councillors, are you happy for me to put this straight to the vote? I say, councillors, for the officer's recommendation, I would like all those who are for the recommendation to raise their hands. So, and councillor Ames.
My hand is virtually in the air, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I can't see it from here. Apologies. Okay, so that's carried unanimously. So, sorry. I said he could put his screen on. Sorry. Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, we'll come to 12.4, which is the provision of agricultural services. And I'm not sure if you want to speak to this. You spoke to this last week.
No, nothing to add, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillors, do you have any questions on this particular topic? Thank you. Sorry, councillors, we'll return to 12.4. So, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation that council accepts the offer submitted by Beaver Tree Services, trading as Beaver Tree Services, to provide arboricultural services in accordance with the terms and conditions as specified in RFT 05/2023 for a period of 3 years, with an option to extend the term of the contract by 1 year, plus a further option of 1 year at the submitted schedule of rates. The term of the contract, including any extensions, will not exceed 5 years in total. Councillors, do I have a mover for that item? Councillor John, sorry. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Polifka. Do I have anyone against? I'll declare that carried. I cannot see his hand.
It's always up, isn't it, John?
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. Councillor Polifka, you had a differential rates refund policy declaration.
More than happy to go and get a refreshment, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Polifka. So, councillors, this is 12.5 differential rates refund review. Again, this was covered fairly extensively last week. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so the officer's recommendation that Council 1 notes this report, thereby allowing the differential rates refund policy to expire through the effusion of time. 2 notes that a copy of the differential rates refund policy will be provided to each of the eligible landowners by the 31st December 2023. So, councillors, unless there's questions, do I have a mover for that item? Councillor Carter. Seconded, Councillor John. Is there anyone against? I'll declare that carried. 12.6 is the use of town facilities, and they're all disappearing. Councillor Polifka, we're up to item 12.6, which is the use of town facilities. Now, Mr. CEO, did you have any, because I've sent for an amendment and we've discussed it, but I just want to ensure that the staff are reasonably okay with that, and if you had any comments to add.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The staff have reviewed that and we consider it on balance to be more than acceptable. It still provides an incentive for the Infant Health Centre to think about alternate accommodation, which we think is better alternate accommodation at the Ashfield Community Centre. And I think the inclusion of having dates commencing July 24th for that option, and I think having a closeout date of the December 31st to coincide with our land asset strategy vacancies in other areas, I think is a good balanced amendment. Thank you.
So could I just ask you to explain why the inclusion of the dates for the BIC site, because we had a discussion about that this afternoon.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the councils would remember we recently adopted the land and asset strategy, and some of those properties in there which was discussed under confidential cover, one of the adjoining properties was identified as becoming available at 2027, at which time council considered that it would like that to be considered for alternate purposes as part of the Town Centre Master Plan. And so having this adjoining property vacant at the same time would allow us to facilitate the Town Centre Master Plan aspirations as potentially absorbing those two lots together.
Okay, so councillors, questions? I also have a question, but okay. So can I just ask a question? So obviously the intent of my amendment is to make the offer of either property for lease to the Department of Health. If, for instance, they wish to stay in the current site on the BIC, which is available up until the end of December 2027, I would assume that a future council, if there was an intent from the Department of Health to continue in that site, that would be a decision for a future council at that date. Would that be correct?
Not as I understand it, Madam Mayor. The dot point 3 does not have an option.
Okay.
It is an end date for a particular person because council, in my mind, has already made a decision in the land asset strategy that this particular site would be freed up to achieve the Town Centre Master Plan objectives. It is not to be an ongoing arrangement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a follow-up question on that. In terms of that, so whilst we're specifying an end date, I mean, all that would mean is that the health department can't compel us to keep that available for them, but a future council, if it decided to depart from the land asset strategy, which potentially they would be able to, that would be a matter for them. So at that point in time, if they wish to continue that arrangement, they could enter into a new lease, presumably.
That is correct if they were to request to a future council.
Thank you, Councillor Plifer. I think you phrased it better than I did. So, okay. Councillors, further questions on this item? So, councillors, clearly there was an officer recommendation which I have amended. So,
Madam Mayor, I think Councillor Burke may have.
Councillor Burke, sorry.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Cameron. I just wanted to check, and maybe you're clarifying that now, just the dates on what was just discussed just then. Sorry, I was distracted.
Have you had a chance? We're just going to give you a copy. Yeah. So what I'll do is read out the amendment in its entirety. That Council 1 requests the CEO engages with the Department of Health to progress the establishment of a lease for a site to house the infant health clinic, thereby ensuring the continuality of this service valued by the community of the town of Bassendean. 2, notes that the town offers to lease to the Department of Health contemporary quality facilities at the Ashfield Community Centre, inclusive of a 12-month rent-free period to assist with the relocation of the service from the current older building on the BIC reserve commencing July 2024. Now, I did actually change that slightly to either up to or up to July, because they could take that up earlier if they wanted to.
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, okay.
It just means that we have provided an alternate arrangement, so council has provided confidence to the community that we value the service and want it to continue, but by the same token, we have spent considerable money restoring that building and we can't keep it vacant for a long term without having some commitment from the Department of Health or other parties.
Okay. Point 3 is, as an alternative option for the Department of Health, the town will offer formal lease for the ongoing use of the current infant health clinic facility on BIC Reserve, commencing immediately and expiring on the December 31st, 2027. And the fourth point requests that a progress report be presented to council via the bulletin as required. So, councillors, do you have any further questions on this particular amendment?
Just the descriptions given of the two facilities, so Ashfield and the BIC reserve facility. So we're happy with that description, contemporary quality as opposed to current older building. That's a sort of apt description of what we're dealing with?
That is a fair assessment.
Great, thanks.
Further questions, councillors? Okay, so I'd like to move this amendment. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Plivka. Do I have anyone against? No? Still can't see his hand. Okay, so I'll declare that carried. Okay. So, councillors, we will move on to 12.10, which is draft amended local planning policy 2, sustainable development. Again, this was a fairly straightforward report. I doubt that that Mr. Gibson would like to provide any further commentary. Councillors, do you have any questions on this item? Okay, councillors, we have an officer recommendation. Can I ask if I've got a mover for that officer? Councillor Plivka, seconded Councillor Carter. Do I have anyone against? I'll declare that carried. We move to 12.11, contract variation, supply and installation of a bore at Ashfield Reserve. Again, this was covered off during the briefing. Mr. Adams, you don't have anything to add? Okay. Councillors, do you have any questions on this item? No. Do we have a mover? Councillor Burke, a seconder. Councillor Plivka. Is there anyone against? I'll declare that carried. And we now move. So, yes, yep. So we have no motions of which previous notice has been given. I don't believe we have any announcements of notices of motion for the next meeting. There is no urgent business. So with that, we will move to confidential business. Can I have a mover to go behind closed doors? Councillor Carter, seconded Councillor John. Do I have anyone against? I declare that carried. We'll move behind closed doors. Have some close. And when the recording's back on?
Now, Joe, we should be announcing the
Okay.
Yeah, just the outcomes of both of those items. The officer's recommendation.
Sorry, I haven't got 16.1. Apologies, councillors. The computer is very, very unwilling to cooperate. Okay, so in respect to item 16.2, I can confirm that Council 1 endorses the interim FOGO supply agreement between the Town of Bassendean and Eastern Metropolitan Regional Council as contained as a confidential attachment to this report, authorises the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, to negotiate and approve any minor amendments to the interim FOGO supply agreement. 3, authorises the Chief Executive Officer and Mayor to sign the interim FOGO supply agreement under the common seal of the Town of Bassendean. And 4, requests the EMRC to undertake a review of the agreement and or fees and charges prior to commencement of the blended FOGO gate rate to incorporate a sliding fee scale based on contamination rates and other methods of incentivising a reduction in contamination rates. A simple majority was required and that was carried unanimously. 16.3, appointment of members of the Audit and Governance Committee. The officer recommendation reads as follows: that Council 1 appoints Sasha Readymakers as the member nominated to the Audit and Governance Committee for a 2-year period expiring on the next ordinary council government election day unless otherwise indicated. Endorses the engagement of Mr Ron Back as an advisor to the Audit and Governance Committee for a 2-year period expiring on the next ordinary local government election day unless otherwise indicated.
So, sorry, Madam Mayor, that wasn't the officer recommendation.
Sorry, it was... It's written in there as that. So council recommendation, apologies for that. Okay, so the next briefing session will be held on Tuesday the 12th of December 2023, commencing at 6 p.m. The next ordinary council meeting will be held on the 19th of December 2023, commencing at 6 p.m. And I'll declare this meeting closed at 8:36. Thank you, councillors.